What's happening, YouTube? Owen here from Dark Entertainment, the place to hear tales from Wales and afar. If you're into creepy stories donated to us by people like yourselves, then feel free to like and subscribe. Anyway, let's get into the video. During 2007 to 2008, a disturbing phenomenon began to grip a small Welsh community, and eventually started to fascinate a much larger audience. Since this is a true story, and sensitive in nature, viewer discretion is advised. In 2007, 18-year-old Dale Crowell disappeared from his home on September the 25th, whilst on his way to visit his friend David Dilling. Dale was by all accounts an upbeat young man who enjoyed a drink with his friends. He'd had several minor scrapes with the law over the use of illegal substances like cannabis and pills, but other than that, enjoyed life. His body was eventually found in a disused warehouse in an amusement park in Porthcawl on the 5th of January 2008, in a state of bad decomposition. There was no evidence of foul play according to the coroner, and the only thing out of the ordinary was the presence of cannabis and ecstasy in his system. Little did the wider public know, but the discovery of Dale's body marked the beginning of one of the strangest occurrences in local memory. With the discovery of Dale, David Dilling struggled with the realization that he had lost his best friend. He was found hanging from a tree near his local church. Just a week later, another friend of the pair hung himself directly opposite the spot where David hung himself. Thomas Davis had just finished laying out his suit for David's funeral. This pattern began repeating itself again and again. By the end of 2008, a total of 26 young men and women had taken their own lives. Almost all had hung themselves. But the question that lingered on everyone's mind was, why did no one see the signs? Parents, friends, colleagues, anyone associated with these teens, none of them had any inkling that there was anything wrong. The phenomenon wasn't just isolated to young men. Once the media began reporting on the deaths of the young women, public interest increased dramatically. On average, suicide in men is 3 times higher than that of young women, but in the case of Bridgend, the female suicide was much higher. So what caused a large amount of young men and women to take their own lives? One of the contributing factors of this terrible disaster was that of drugs and alcohol. Dale Crowell reportedly had traces of ecstasy in his system, and many of the other teens had high levels of alcohol and cannabis found during the autopsy. But not everyone who takes drugs and alcohol end up taking their own life. A large area of Bridgend has a considerable issue with crime in the less affluent areas of the county. It has a high rate of drug and alcohol abuse, and issues with antisocial behaviour. An environment such as this can breed anxiety and depression. Like any human emotion, depression is, to an extent, contagious. In the same way that being in the company of someone who is always laughing makes you laugh and smile too, people experiencing depression can lower the mood of those closest to them. However, this is more extreme than that. The death of a friend or family member or even colleague can have a devastating effect on those closest to them, known as complicated grief. When that person has made the decision to end their own life, the grief can be unbearable, especially if that person was completely unaware of the torment that their friend was going through. Feelings of betrayal, anger, and sadness can end up consuming them to the point where they could see no other way out than to end their own life. Why the vast majority of the teens decided to use suicide by hanging is still unknown, but the numbers of suicide cases still continue to rise in the aftermath of the media stopping reporting. Some state that the number of deaths is actually in the hundreds. The media played a huge part in the ongoing tragedy. The reporting of each tragedy helped to fuel the fire, with each teen not being able to get away from the ongoing horror. Speculation on the media didn't help either. Newspapers reporting that all the teens were part of a suicide cult, or that social media was to blame, and in some cases that a serial killer was on the loose and causing the teens to do this, only increased the attention to the area. After a while, the police requested that the media not report on the deaths. This episode was an incredibly difficult episode to research. Having listened to the torment of those left behind and the sadness that still continues in the area, I debated on whether to release this episode. In the end, I've decided to release it in the hopes that anyone who watches it can find the help that is needed. There is a huge amount of help out there when it comes to being able to discuss depression, and I have put links in the description and at the end of the video. As someone who has suffered with depression in my life, I can fully sympathise with how debilitating it can be. Don't suffer alone, always seek help. As for all those affected by the utterly tragic events discussed in this episode, I hope that you find peace after your loss. That's all from us here at Dark Entertainment. On the screen now is a list of sites that offer assistance for those struggling with mental health. If you enjoyed the episode, then feel free to like and subscribe.